Hello and welcome to CSW's first virtual Just Gathering, coming to you from Edinburgh. I'm Ruth Donaldson and I look after the work of CSW here in Scotland. Now normally we do hosting our Just Gatherings live in person in Glasgow and in Inverness. While geography in many ways can limit how far we can go together with others, I believe that since the global pandemic, geography has gained a new meaning. Anyone, anywhere, be it in the UK or the world, can join in together apart in a virtual gathering being hosted here in Scotland. Our Just Gatherings are designed to bring people together over shared principles: faith, hospitality, community and justice. Things we can continue to share in together, even when apart.
So will the Prime Minister agree to meet with me and a representative from Christian Solidarity Worldwide to look more closely at this issue and ensure that India upholds the freedom of religion and belief?
I'm more than happy to meet the honourable gentleman.
In Meriam case, I believe the advocacy she had saved her life.
Tonight we will be interviewing a strong lineup of guests who will be sharing their experiences of seeking justice, particularly for those persecuted for their faith or their belief, their personal testimonies of their own faith or belief, and how COVID is shaping their work. We will also be highlighting simple but effective ways you can continue to make a difference from the four walls of your own home. And we will also be looking forward to hosting a live Q&A on Zoom where you can ask any of our guests your questions. So first up we have Mohaned, a high-profile human rights lawyer from Sudan who has personally felt the cost of standing up for the rights of others. Mohaned will be sharing his experiences of working on cases that hit global headlines, such as that of Meriam Ibrahim in 2014. So get comfortable and watch this eye-opening conversation with Mohaned and Dave Mance, CSW's head of campaigns.
Hi.
Hi Dave, how are you?
Very good. Good to be talking to you at last.
Yes. I think we have met
one time
in the Foreign Office.
Yes. It's always good to have books in the background, I think. It shows a certain amount of learning. This is my daughter's bedroom. So I've got a book on Minecraft secrets and cheats. Not very high.
This is my son's bedroom. And they said the same bed like yours.
Yeah, we got similar setup. I also hear that we have similar well, we don't have the same hairdresser, but we both have our wives are our hairdressers at the moment.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, it looks good, yeah. I was surprised,
Yeah.
but she did very well.
Great job. You don't need to
I think I'm going to save some money in the future.
Yeah, in the future. You don't need to waste money. So we should have been in Scotland this weekend. You would have been there. Would that be your first time in Scotland?
No. I have been there, I think, 3 times.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very good. What, recently?
Recently, yeah. When the revolution in Sudan started, I made a speech in some cities in Glasgow and Edinburgh. And then they invited me to other events to speak about the legal situation, the political situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Arabic. So that would be my first time to go there to speak in English.
All right, that's so interesting. Okay. Well, I'm sure that everyone's looking forward to having you there another time once all this has calmed down.
Yeah, I hope so.
So let me just introduce you. So Mohaned has been working with CSW for around 6 years and has worked as a human rights lawyer on some of really the most high-profile cases that CSW has advocated on. In 2018, Mohaned and his family had to flee Sudan, and they're currently living in the UK. And in December 2018, Mohaned was awarded the Special Envoy's Prize on Freedom of Religion or Belief. So welcome, Mohaned.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's my most pleasure to be with you.
Well, the pleasure's all ours. Can you just start by telling us, maybe, how did you come to work as a human rights lawyer?
Well, I grew up in a country that full of violations human rights violations, and I never tolerate with this action towards my people. So discrimination based on religion, on ethnicity, on gender. So you can imagine how the situation in Sudan was and still is to some extent. So as an educated person, I believe this is my responsibility to take an action and to do what I could, yeah, to change the situation. So yeah,
did I interrupt you there? Were you going to say any more?
no,
Okay.
no, yeah, you have to do so. I'm a lawyer, and you know lawyers are talkative, so you have to interrupt me at some point.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I work with a lot of them, so I've got good experience in that. So yeah, in 2014, Meriam Ibrahim's case hit headlines all over the world. It was such a high-profile case. She was a woman accused, sentenced to 100 lashes for adultery, to death for apostasy. She was pregnant at the time. She had her toddler Martin with her during that time in prison, as well as giving birth. And it was a very high-profile case. How did you come to work on her case?
I have been a human rights lawyer since 2005, and fortunately, I work in many states in Sudan, in Darfur, Blue Nile, South Kordofan, in the east, and so on. So one of my colleagues contacted me, introduced me to Daniel, Mariam's ex. So I represented Meriam. She has a lawyer at that time, but her advice to Meriam is to renounce her Christianity, and that was a fundamental disagreement between them. So she has to withdraw, and I continue with Meriam, along with my legal team.
Yeah, she said that at the time, so many people were pressuring her. You know, even the guard in prison was like, look, just say what you need to say and you can go. And interesting that even her own legal team initially was saying that to her. So,
but this is what happens in most cases. Just renounce and go home, and no one knows what's going on after that. So imagine in Meriam's case, if she did that, and where she's going to be, and with the extremists, with the family that want her executed, and with her children. So you can imagine how the situation was.
The CSW advocate who's working with you was in touch with you almost daily during that case and was lobbying kind of key advocacy targets, getting them to speak out against this sentence and urge the Sudanese authorities to overturn it. And at the same time as that, I think over 60,000 people in the UK, US, Latin America were all campaigning for Meriam's release. I wonder if you could just give us a bit of an insight. How do the advocacy and the campaigning and mobilization, how does that kind of complement the work that you were doing at the time on Meriam's case in Sudan?
Well, as a human rights lawyer, I do believe and understand the importance of the advocacy. And for me, the advocacy and the legal efforts are together the wings of these cases, and you can't fly by only one wing. In Meriam's case, I believe the advocacy she had saved her life, and in two ways. As you said, the pressure on the government to release her was a huge, that was really positive. But her personality was a crucial, and she's absolutely strong. But she couldn't stand without your campaign, without the support. And I used to visit her almost daily and to update her how is the situation outside these walls and how many people are supporting you. And this gave her strength and power. No one would blame her if she decided to not go further. But she managed to do that, but with the support from the world. inside Sudan and outside Sudan. And I received lots of letters, lots of cards, and I used to show her these letters and these cards and see how people are supporting you, and some Facebook also campaigns, Save Meriam, and so yeah. And to be honest, everyone thought she's going to give up. It was like gamble. She will renounce. She will not. She was. I myself, I had no doubt she will fight to the last. But yeah, the campaign was really important, and the campaign also protected us as a lawyer. You know, it wasn't an issue for NISS to arrest us, and this is happening as normal in Sudan. But the campaign in and outside Sudan, it really protected us.
That is so interesting, because I was definitely aware of the work that the campaigning does in terms of putting pressure on Sudanese authorities, but I hadn't really thought about how those acts of solidarity would have really helped Meriam. I also didn't realize the way that you are also protected in some way, at least, by the campaigning that's happening there.
Yeah, Ness asked me to convince Meriam to renounce her Christianity, and if not, me and her both will be in trouble, and my colleagues as well. And the case wasn't that familiar and wasn't that popular at that time. But after 15th of May, the case has been very mentioned everywhere, and we become non-lawyers. So this is like shield us.
Can you tell us, what did it feel like when Meriam was actually finally released?
Relief, I would say, relief, but it's still worried. There is so many extremists that calling for her death, and they threatened her life and publicly said, if the court did not execute her, we are going to take the law of Allah by our hand. So it was really dangerous situation for her, and I was really worried about the situation.
And I think that is so true for so many cases that we work on. There's this kind of moment where it's high profile and everyone's reading about it in the news, but actually often once someone is released, that's a whole other huge challenge. It's just a different kind of challenge, but it's not like everything's easy once someone's released. So then in 2015, the following year, you then worked on the case of Reverend Jack Michael and Reverend Peter Reith. And that was kind of the first of several cases where religious leaders were particularly targeted with death penalty charges. So again, that's another kind of quite high profile case. I guess by that point you were kind of becoming known for working particularly on these kind of religious freedom cases.
Yes, I was. Yes. I think at that time I'm proud to say I gave my legal advices or represented Christians in 10 of 100 of cases at that time, in variety of violations, demolishing churches or confiscating properties, or challenging administrative decisions by the officials towards Christian and Christianity. So and I remember during the case of Yatam Bita, I got arrested with Pastor Hafiz, the evangelical pastor, a day before a very important hearing in this case. I had no doubt I would stay at least until next day, so I will miss the hearing. So the only thing I did is to text the Sudan desk in CSW before they took my phone. I just sent a message. I got arrested with Pastor Hafiz in Bahrain. A couple of hours, they called us and they said, "Well, you can't go." I said, "Really? Are you serious?" "Yeah, you can't go." When I when I left the custody, I realized that everyone on the planet knows I was arrested. Uh, I realized that I was really known. EU, UN, the human rights organizations, the MCs, and I believe all of them sent messages to the government and put pressure on the government to release us. So well done, CSW.
That's a great story. So you have mentioned, a lot of really serious harassment that you were getting, and in 2018, you and your family finally had to flee Sudan. What was it that finally pushed you to that decision?
Well, the threat became very serious. After they demolished my own house, exactly like they do with churches and other Christian properties, by court order. Um, and that was, they told me, you exceeded all the red lines, and they threatened me and my family. And when I got arrested the last time, I know that arresting is something become normal for me and many human rights lawyers in Sudan. But in 2018, the March, that was the first time they tortured me. I heavily tortured. Um, so I realized that they're serious and they're going to do something bad for me or my family. So I had to leave the country.
Mm.
I crossed the border to a neighbor country because I was banned from travel. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm safe with my family here, but I miss my work and I miss my people.
Yeah, it's so important for us to be aware of that, because you're in a strange land now, and this isn't your home. And I'm sure you've had some cases of great hospitality here, and perhaps some not so good. But the fact is, you're not able to. It may be peaceful here, but it's not your home, and you shouldn't have
Yeah,
ever had to leave.
yes,
So I guess that brings me on to trying to understand a little bit about your your reasons for doing this work, because you had a very successful private practice, and then you were doing kind of human rights cases pro bono. You're not a Christian, you're a lawyer, and you could have just focused on your business and not had to kind of interact with the police and NIST, the security services. So
yeah.
why did you work on these cases, and not just human rights, but actually cases where of particularly religious freedom, which is such a high pressure kind of area?
Yeah, as I told you earlier, since 2005, I decided to, even before that, but when I became a lawyer, I decided to work in this field, and someone has to stand with them. And it wasn't easy at the beginning. Most of my colleagues, Muslim colleagues, disagreed with me, and some of Christians, they didn't trust me because I'm Muslim, found Christians a bit weird in my community. But yeah, I would say, if you ask me what achievement you are proud of, I would say bringing Muslims, Christians, atheists, lawyers from everywhere together. So this is something I'm really proud of. And those lawyers, I built good connections, good network of lawyers that are defending freedom of belief, and they're still fighting there.
Mm.
You can imagine sometimes we appear before the court 30, 40 lawyers present only one client. So that was really good. Yeah, for me, it doesn't matter if I'm Muslim or Christian. Or the human is the most important. The human being is the most important thing. And my role is to defend the people's right. So that's why I decided to stand with my brothers and sisters Christian.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I think, yeah, you should be so proud of that work, and also proud of, yeah, the ways in which through doing that you're really breaking down barriers between religious groups. And so last year Sudan was in the news with kind of protesters on the streets and the overthrow of President al-Bashir, real sense of hope at that time, and all that was going on back home for you while you were here in the UK. How did you feel during that time, and how were you able to contribute even though you were over here as part of the diaspora?
It's heartbroken to miss the moment when Bashir and his regime fell down. It is really heartbroken. Yeah, but yeah, we did it. At the end, we did it.
And am I right in thinking you testified with us, was it at Geneva, and just shared about your experiences?
Yes, of course. Yeah, this kind of the activities. Yeah, so I was in Geneva with CSW and this kind of the activities I worked on.
Yeah, it's just so important in those forums for people to be able to hear directly from those who experience those things and who can really give a true account.
Yeah, and thank you. I couldn't be able to do that without your support.
Well, Mohaned, we just appreciate you so much, and we just value so much the working relationship of so many years, and it's just a really awesome thing. Perhaps we could just end, you could share with us, perhaps you and your family, you know, you're here now in the UK. Is there something that we can be praying for you?
Yeah, pray for Sudan and for its stability, so my family and I could go there one day, and yeah, and enjoy the sun back home.
Yeah, that's something we can't really offer you here, I'm afraid. Well, this has been really good to talk to you, and really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you, Mohaned and Dave. One of the things that stood out to me about Mohaned's story was the power of a small action that can cause a global ripple effect through the way in which people respond in order to make a positive difference. In Mohaned's case, it was one simple text that got global powers to raise their voice and secure his release. Mohaned showed another great example of this through the actions of thousands of people on Facebook who simply put their name to an online petition which played a vital part in helping secure Meriam Ibrahim's eventual release. Do not underestimate the power of any small act of love and generosity you can make today. A lot of little actions together can make a huge difference. We may be in lockdown, but lockdown cannot and will not stop us from seeking justice in the lives of our local and global neighbours. I take hope knowing that while being contained within our four walls of our own homes, the potential reach and action we make today and how that could help someone, be it a few feet or thousands of miles away, could actually make a huge difference. Thanks to the internet. Even more so today, geography can no longer limit our global reach in how we choose to seek justice. And with all that said, I would love to invite you to respond by choosing to take one tiny action that will cost you nothing other than 2 minutes of your time to help people around the world today. We'd like you to help make a stand by advocating to close China's re-education camps and protect Uyghurs from COVID-19. Over 1 million people have been placed into re-education camps in Xinjiang because of their ethnicity and religion. Conditions inside the camps are dangerously unsanitary and overcrowded, and this human rights crisis could now turn into a deadly outbreak on a mass scale. Through our website, you'll be able to send a letter in your name to your local MP asking them to raise their voice about the situation. A great tip recommended by our next guest is that you can also further personalise this letter to your MP. It only takes a few minutes. Up next we have the MP for Glasgow East, David Linden. If you're like me and you have the opportunity to listen to PMQs every Wednesday, whenever you hear a local accent, your ears prick up and you notice you listen a little more closely. This was the case for me shortly before lockdown, where David took centre stage in the House of Commons. He asked the Prime Minister to respond to the crisis in India, where scores of Christians and Muslims are facing discrimination because of their religion or belief, and to meet with CSW to discuss this. I'm glad to say this was met with a positive response by the Prime Minister, and you can imagine it was at this point I might have been dancing around my living room in celebration at hearing this during lunch. And so without further ado, get ready and be inspired by David Linden, who is interviewed by Joanne Collins, our CSW's Parliamentary Officer.
So, hi, I'm Joanne Moore, Parliamentary Officer at CSW, and my guest here today is David Linden, Member of Parliament for Glasgow East. David is the SNP spokesperson on housing, communities and local government, and he regularly raises freedom of religion or belief in the House of Commons. Welcome, David.
Hi, Joanne. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, fine. Adjusting to this new normal, like everybody else, but just trying to get on with it as best I can now. But I certainly realised quite early on that this is going to be the new normal, and so whilst it's right that we focused on domestic priorities in our constituencies and at Westminster, it's really, really important that we keep our eyes fixed on some of the international issues as well, because just because we've got a global pandemic doesn't mean that people are suffering in silence elsewhere in the world. So for me, it's really important that we keep these issues on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much for doing so. Could you start by telling us a bit about how you became an MP? What was your journey to Parliament?
I guess on paper, I'm not somebody who would be from a kind of traditional political background. I grew up in a council estate, was brought up by a single parent, left school at 16, didn't go to university. So on paper, I'm not somebody who would go and become a politician. But in my own community, I kind of engaged in kind of local politics, and I believe in Scottish independence, and so joined the SNP. And so, as I say, I started at a young age just going campaigning, and had no interest in becoming a politician. Actively probably avoided the idea. I really felt that going and kind of standing for election myself was not something that I would be comfortable doing. Part of that, I think, was partly because of my Christian faith. The idea that when you stand for election and you're asked about your faith, that can be quite an uncomfortable thing. And the vast majority of people that I represent probably go through day-to-day life without thinking of Jesus and kind of what he's done for us, and perhaps aren't in a relationship with him. So I think some people find it quite worrying that a politician who believes in the virgin birth, who believes in the feeding of the 5,000, who believes that Jesus was crucified or buried in a tomb and then rose again 3 days later. And so initially for me, the idea of being in the spotlight and being asked those kind of questions just seemed too uncomfortable. And so I'd continued working for politicians, quite happy doing that. And then in 2015, the Scottish independence referendum had come and gone. A Westminster election was on the horizon in Scotland, and the SNP was forecast to do really well. And I remember getting a phone call from somebody who's a cabinet minister, who said to me, "Look, we think you should run in Glasgow East, it's your home constituency." And I remember just laughing down the phone and saying, absolutely no way. I've no interest in standing for election. I really wanted to run a mile from that. And so the person said, "Look, I think you'll regret it, but will you reconsider?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely not." And at that time, that was my decision. And so somebody else was selected in my constituency, and turned out to be a bit of a disaster. And so when the election came in 2017, I got a similar phone call and was told this time, rather than ask me if I would stand for election, I was told you should be standing for election. And probably in the run-up to that, I think I kind of felt that I should be kind of reconsidering that. And because I'd worked for so many other politicians, I think I'd probably get by that kind of initial fear, and accepted that, at times you'll be asked difficult questions and you just got to go on with it. And so I stood for election in 2017, and to be frank, the SNP had a horrific night. We lost 22 seats, and I was the only new MP elected that night, with a majority of just 75 votes. And so I guess at that stage I kind of thought to myself, well, or perhaps this is where I'm meant to be. I don't necessarily believe in coincidence. So that's how I kind of wound up in Parliament. And I still, every day walking into the Westminster, kind of find myself thinking, I'm a complete fraud. Why am I here? Somebody's going to come and tap my shoulder and say you need to leave. But it's not happened yet, and they've been letting me in for the last 3 years now, so I just got on with it.
Keep your head down. And you touched on it a bit at the beginning, but your work has obviously changed because of coronavirus. Could you tell us a bit about how it's shifted and what you're up to at the moment?
I'm kind of in an unusual position insofar as, as a kind of community leader. People are obviously coming to us for kind of advice and for help. So our kind of workload has really kind of shot up, particularly in the early stages of this. And I think as a politician, if you've got a global pandemic, if you've got your health service under pressure, if you've got children not at school, if you've got an economic crisis, any of those things in and of themselves would be difficult. But for them to be all going on at the one time, it is particularly challenging. So certainly in the first couple of weeks, I think our constituency caseload was up about fivefold. And that can be a multitude of things, from people being stuck abroad to people having lost their job and having no income, and then kind of increasingly dealing with really challenging cases where family members are stuck abroad and missing being able to be back here to watch a loved one die.
Yeah, it sounds really heartbreaking and challenging. But I know we're all glad that you're continuing your work in Parliament despite everything that's going on. And with your constituents.
Yeah, and freedom of religion and belief is something that's hugely important to my constituents as well. So it's about trying to find that balance, as I say, where you're dealing with the domestic casework. I think a good politician is somebody who gets that balance between being proactive and reactive.
And you touched on it just now that you've been such a great advocate for freedom of religion or belief in Parliament, and I just wondered, why is this issue so close to your heart?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, I certainly don't do this on my own. There are a kind of strong group of politicians and a really good cross-party basis. I think that in itself is a pretty good witness. For example, Jim Shannon, who's the MP from Northern Ireland. If you put Jim Shannon and I down on paper, we would not be people who would normally get along. He's a kind of unionist from Northern Ireland. I'm a nationalist from Scotland. We have very, very different political views. But the reality is that Jim's probably one of my kind of closest and dearest friends in Parliament, and it's because we've understood that although we've got our politics, we also have our faith. And so whilst we have very, very different views on our politics, we're united in that common bond and believing in Jesus Christ. I came to faith probably slightly later in my life. I was in the kind of late teens when I kind of came into a relationship with Christ. But I remember very vividly, and I think it was during the Arab Spring, but there was a photograph that was doing the rounds online, and it was a group of Christians who were linked arm in arm, and they were protecting Muslims who were praying in Tahrir Square. And I just remember at the time, still being kind of relatively new to faith, probably only about 3 years or so into my kind of faith journey, and just at the time thinking, firstly, that was such a good witness for our faith as Christians, but most importantly, that is exactly what I would want if I was a Christian in North Korea or Saudi Arabia or China or India or any of these kind of countries where we know that life is particularly challenging for Christians.
Yeah, that's such a striking image, and I think it touches on my next question, which is, why do you think it's important that we as Christians speak up for religious freedom for all people?
I think it's about loving your neighbour, and our neighbour isn't just somebody who happens to live next door to us or in my parliamentary constituency. My neighbour is anybody in the world, and if somebody chooses to follow the Islamic faith, then it's up to me to make sure that they are protected and able to do so, and that they have that freedom to do so. I feel that if I enjoy these relative freedoms to practice my religion and my belief, everybody should have the same opportunity, regardless of what faith they have, or indeed if they have a faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And given in your work you see so many injustices on a small scale and on a massive scale and domestically and internationally, how do you keep your faith and stay positive in the face of all of those injustices and often a lot of negativity?
I think it's about remembering that whether it's through the Bible and just in reality that there are injustices in the world, and for me as a Christian, I've just got to kind of keep my eyes fixed on the fact that Christ has already paid the price for me, and you will have difficulty in this world, but we are told that in the Bible. But it shouldn't necessarily stop us from trying to challenge those injustices, and just seeing the sheer scale and kind of magnitude of the persecution that people face, and thinking, I'm in this incredibly privileged position where I can stand up and I can ask a question in Parliament to the very highest levels of government, and that might not change things. I'll give you an example. The situation in India is something that's really, really close to my heart. We see religious intolerance in India really on the rise, and there are a whole number of other political issues associated with that. But over the last year, that's something that's been kind of working away at me, and I was selected in the ballot for Prime Minister's questions a while back. And I thought, right, this is an opportunity to ask Boris Johnson a question. And he's somebody who's got a huge number of things on his plate, and particularly in recent weeks, whether it's been in intensive care and having a baby and all these kind of things. But at the best of time, Prime Minister's got a lot on his plate. But if I ask that question, he has got to have that in his head, and he's got to be thinking about it and agree to meet with me and kind of spend 15 minutes focusing on that situation. Then that's me making a difference in some way. And if the Prime Minister of the UK then makes representations to the Indian government, then that's a really small thing that can happen. But it's a very privileged position I'm in. So I try and kind of focus on the fact that you might not change the world overnight. Politicians seldom do. But if you can try and just inch things forward a little bit, then I kind of feel that I'm playing my own part in God's kingdom, and that's something that I think is a huge privilege and one that I don't take lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, what has encouraged you recently in your work?
I think probably it's not cliche to say this, but I mean, the churches in particular in my constituency, they're great at the best of times, but the way in which churches and voluntary groups have just kind of rallied around folk to try and make sure that people don't fall through the cracks has been hugely inspiring. My own church, they've adapted really well to kind of streaming Sunday services and community touch points through the week, 2-metre ministries where they're still going out and helping people with food and people who are isolated. So I've just been really, really encouraged by that, because when the whole coronavirus issue kicked off, I did really, really fear for people, and I still do. But I've been really greatly encouraged by how the church is kind of stood up and been counted, and is showing such a kind of bright light and just the love of Christ throughout this. I think that's something I'm incredibly proud of.
And on a slightly different note, do MPs read emails and letters that campaigners send? And do you have any tips for how our supporters and we can get your attention?
Yeah, and I think that's the key word there, Joanna's attention. Very much in politics, it's a case of he or she who shouts loudest tends to be heard. And I've seen that through just 3 years as an MP in my own right, and then about a decade before working for other politicians. What's in a politician's mailbag or inbox tends to influence what they talk about. So in recent years, we've been understandably bombarded about things like Brexit and climate change, and so that has really kind of defined the nature of what we talk about in Parliament. So yeah, I think my advice to people watching this is to contact your MP regularly and often about these issues, because the reality is that when I go into my office on a Monday morning and kind of look at all the posts that's come in and all the emails that come in, if I've got kind of 15 or 20 emails about climate change, and I've got one email about I don't know, like a kind of local dog fouling issue or something like that, then yeah, I'll deal with both of them, but I'm going to give more weight and probably take more interest in the thing that 15 or 20 people have written to me about. So I think keeping that voice up regularly and keeping that just kind of persevere is something that's really important, but also to do so in your own words. So one of the things that frustrates quite a lot of MPs is what we call lobby correspondence. So basically you get like a kind of centralised campaign where somebody just fills in their name, it's completely pre-populated text, and 300 of them are sent off. So it's 300 names, but it's the same text. And ordinarily what that does is it creates quite a lot of work for the staff in a parliamentary office, because let's be honest, it's not members of parliament that are sitting logging all these individually, they're far too busy to do that. And so in some respects there's a little bit of resentment that gets built up about that. So what I've found has been really effective in my kind of experience in this is that if you get lots of letters that are kind of worded slightly differently, or there's a slightly different style to it, but it's in one common theme, you know, if you realise that lots of people have taken the time to sit down and draft an email in their own words, or a letter in their own words, and you're receiving 15 to 20 of them, then you realise that that is something that's really powerful.
And I think it's helpful as well what you said about busting the Christian jargon, that we don't use phrases that we think everyone should know because we know it and the church knows it, and I try and explain why it is those issues are so relevant and are so important, that, like you say, church meetings in India are getting disrupted. Well, why does that interest us? It's so important to explain that, because otherwise it can seem very far away.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing as well. You know, if you're speaking to the MP for Milton Keynes and you say, well, you know, church meetings in India are being disrupted, you might think, well, that's quite far away. But if you said to them, you know, how would you feel about a church meeting in the Milton Keynes being disrupted? Well, that would be shocking, and that would be a violation of human rights. That would be a violation of people's basic freedoms. And so I think it's really important that when we were having these conversations, we try and kind of localise them to fit them into a kind of local context. Because if there's one thing that politicians understand, it's a local context.
When a campaigner or supporter emails you about an issue that's close to their heart, say on freedom of religion or belief, what methods or tools do you have in Westminster to raise that with the government?
So as I say, I'm in a very, very blessed position in terms of being able to influence and raise awareness of things. So I'll probably go through them. I mean, firstly, very simply, I can write a letter to a government minister, and they've got to reply to that. And it's quite simple that, you know, when I put a kind of parliamentary letter in front of a minister, they've got to read it. A response has got to be drafted for the civil service. The civil service have got to go away and look at the issue, and in doing so, that flags that issue up. And so every night, you know, a government minister sits with a red box of all these letters, goes through them, and so by my very writing to them puts it on their radar. And so if you're a Foreign Office minister covering India, and I've written to you and said, well, what about, you know, these people that were coming back on a bus from a church convention and the bus was ambushed? All right, well, I didn't know that, so they have to go and have a look at it. So that's the ministerial letters, written questions as well. That's a slightly more public way of kind of asking the government questions. They are duty bound to respond to that. So again, they've got to go away and investigate the issue. More often than not, they've got to take some form of action, even privately. So that might be in a future ministerial meeting, a Foreign Office counterpart will have to say to their foreign minister, look, I'm getting a bit of pressure from London from this MP who keeps asking me about why you keep, you know, disturbing prayer meetings, or why you've brought in these citizenship laws. Then kind of further to that, you've got things like early day motions, where you can kind of raise awareness of it. That brings it to the attention of other MPs. Further to that, you've got parliamentary debates. I think sometimes, you know, we as MPs probably think that, you know, we're just in this very uncomfortable room with green leather seats and talking to each other. But the thing that I'm always kind of aware of is the fact that these things are broadcast. And so that, you know, they're broadcast on TV, and, you know, straight away, as soon as you're talking about it, again, you're holding the minister to account, but other people are starting to learn about the situation in Cuba, the situation in China. And then probably over and above that, in the most extreme thing, is what I did a month or two ago, which was to raise the situation with the Prime Minister during the kind of highlight of the parliamentary week. I mean, you've got pretty much every Westminster journalist focused on Prime Minister's questions. I'm in a room with 500 people and I stand up. I've got the floor to myself and I ask them, you know, what are we doing to kind of raise the violations of Christians, of Muslims in India? And will you meet with me to discuss that? And at that stage, the Prime Minister's not got you know, a lot of wiggle room. He's got to agree to the meeting, which will take place. And very publicly, I don't doubt that will have been watched in the Indian embassy in London and will have been relayed back home. That, you know, for that 30 seconds, for that minute of the day in the UK, every politician in the UK Parliament was hearing about persecution of Christians and Muslims in India. So, I mean, that's just some of the things we've got in our toolkit, which I try and use regularly, and hope that in doing so we kind of move things a bit.
Well, thank you so much, David, for joining us for this interview. We so appreciate all the work that you do in Parliament, and no doubt I'll be filling up your inbox soon.
Good. So I look forward to it, and I look forward to us getting back to as close to the normal as possible, and seeing you again soon.
Thanks, David and Joanne. Again, we have even more examples of how small but strategic actions can create a large domino effect around the world in pursuit of justice. The fact David knew taking 30 seconds to ask one question had the potential to make significant steps in the right direction. In this case, with the ongoing situation with India. And you don't need to be in the same political party to be able to work together with others in common goals after hearing about David and Jim Shannon's cross-party friendship. Now, before we enter into our live Q&A, I'd love to invite you to consider giving in another way tonight, simply at the touch of a button. If you're able, please consider picking up your phone tonight and through a simple text give £10 to the work of CSW. To help bring justice to people suffering for their faith by supporting our work, simply text CSW10 to 70570 to give £10. CSW receives 100% of your donations. Text costs your donation plus one standard rate message, and please always get the bill payer's permission. If you'd like to CSW to contact you in the future by SMS or call with news from our work and how you can help supporting us, please add info to the end of your message. That's CSW10 info. And one final thing. If what you've heard tonight has got you curious about the world of justice, you can build on that curiosity through joining the many other virtual events we're doing online, including our Faith in Extraordinary Times series, which you can find at 12:30 every Tuesday on Facebook. For those wishing to join us on the live Q&A, please look to your event email for the Zoom link to join in. And if you don't have that event email, you'll be able to see in the Facebook comments a Zoom link for you to use right away. Thank you for your time watching tonight. We'd love to connect with you further in the future, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. We'd love to start up another conversation. Thank you also to everyone who has continued to support CSW, particularly through this time. It is so appreciated. So from here in Edinburgh, good night and God bless. Aikiva.